Hey, this is Arion Salazar from Third Eye Blind and others, and you are listening to the Nothing Shocking podcast.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking podcast, a non-genre based, all ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dog Bowl Studios is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on Twitter at NoShockPod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Ragged Records, located in downtown Rock Island, Illinois, and downtown Davenport, Iowa. We would like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. Tonight's guest is
Arion Salazar.
Yeah, chronicling the first Third Eye Blind album.
Part 1.
Fantastic interview. Let's get to it.
All right, good night.
Good night.
For fans of Ragged Records, Trash Can Annie, downtown Davenport, October 28th, they're doing a live music show event at 6 p.m. with the Golden Fleece and Leviticus.
Fantastic. We'll be there. Ryan, welcome back to the Nothing Shocking podcast. Let me reintroduce you to my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Ryan, thanks for joining us again tonight.
Hey, man. Hey, Jeff. Hey, Eric. What's going on?
Oh, man,
Thanks for
we're
having me.
so happy to have you back on the show tonight. I believe there's something you need to kind of get off your chest here, right?
Yes, thank you. I was just going to say that the last time I was on, I talked about a few lockdown type cover songs. I had done Beatles covers for a Beatles convention. I had all these cool people on it. I had Jeff Schroeder from the Smashing Pumpkins and Alex Skolnick from Testament, Greg Camp from Smash Mouth, and Stephen Bradley from No Doubt, and a bunch of other people. I neglected to mention my partner and the guy who co-produced it, recorded everything, played drums on everything, and basically just made it happen with me. Whose name is Dave Tweedy. So I wanted to say thank you, Dave. I love you, and I miss you. And
Fair enough.
Sending my love out to you, and that's that.
Fair enough. All right. So, for our listeners tonight, we're going to do something a little different. Yeah. We haven't done this in a while. We're going to analyze the debut Third Eye Blind album, and so this is no better way of doing it with Arion Salazar coming back on the podcast. So before we start, I guess, can you give our listeners an insight of the origins of the band?
Yeah, for sure. So my origin with the band starts in 1993. I met Steven in 1993 through a drummer named Tim Wright, who is actually known as a Curveball. He's sort of famous in the Bay Area. He was Primus's first drummer. And he had been playing with Steven and just called. I played in another band with him. He was a friend of mine, and called and said, "Hey, I know this guy. He's looking for a bass player." And so he did the introduction. I went and met Steven at a laundromat called Brainwash in San Francisco, where you can wash your clothes and drink beer and just be like super bohemian. I think that they have those still, probably. But yeah, so we sat down and talked for a minute and realized that we, had musical stuff we loved in common. He's really into the Police, and so was I. We bonded over that. But he actually was recording a track around the corner, so we walked down an alleyway into a door where there was a small studio, and he had a song up called Farther, which is actually, and this is late 93, I believe, and Farther would go on to be on the second Third Eye Blind record, Blue. But yeah, he had a bass track on there. He wasn't into it. He talked about a bass player he was using in the studio he wasn't crazy about. And I just picked up a bass and sort of did a quick track, and he seemed really into it. And we had that was our meeting, and he sort of, pretty sure he just said, so, hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to be in my band? And that was how we left it. And I said, yeah, because it was kind of refreshing. What he was doing was refreshing compared to what I was doing. I was in other bands at the time that were more sort of club bands, like dance music, party music, in the Bay Area scene at the time. It was like, thrash funk, Primus, or either that or metal, or and you know what I'm saying, like mosh pit music, dance music, club music,
sure.
Like music that let's say you go into a club and there's a ripping band on stage and you don't know who they are, but they're exciting, so you get into it. And so we had a draw. My band had a draw, but that's what was trendy in the club scene. And Steven was just doing the singer-songwriter thing, which was like, I love pop music. I love, more than anything, I love the Beatles and songs. And so, yeah, so I was happy to play with him.
I was going to ask you, where does Kevin fall in line in this part of the story?
Well, okay, so Kevin is like almost a year later. First, just briefly, I was given a demo from Steven. Steven had already had some songs. I'm not sure if the demo said Third Eye Blind. I know that he had been playing with the name, but I don't think that they had fully committed to it yet, but it was definitely like the top contender for a name. But the demo he gave me it had Semi-Charmed Life, which is, the big hit for that band, for us. It had an early version of it with like programmed, like loop drums and synth bass and sort of very like electronic sounding. And it was already like, rad. It was already obviously rocking. And also had the song Farther, a song called Deep Inside of You, which also ended up on the second record, a song called Slow Motion, again on the second record, and another one. And so he had a handful of songs that would go on later to be, famous or known Third Eye Blind tunes. And he had some interest. He had interest already. He had, I believe he had like a previous success with another kind of band. It wasn't so much a band. It was a duo with him and somebody else, a guy named Anthony Chun. I think they had a song that was played on 90210 Beverly Hills, I believe. So he had gotten some money that way, and he was just sort of a known quantity in this small way as a songwriter, an up-and-coming songwriter. And but he was trying to change tack and put together a kind of a rock band to play his tunes. And so, yeah, he had a guy named Eric Gotland, who was his friend and manager, and it was like a really good guy with a incredible taste in music and a massive record collection, and like somebody I hit it off with immediately, who was actually helping to fund what Steven was doing. He also had connections with a guy named David Gleason and a guy named Ren Kleiss. Ren Kleiss is now, has been for a while, David Fincher's sound design guy, the director David Fincher. And David Gleason has also like continued to have a successful engineering career. But at the time, David and Ren believed in Steven to the extent that they worked at David Gleason worked for a guy named Walter Afanasieff, who is a massive record producer. He produced all the big Mariah Carey records, the Celine Dion records, And so when Walter was gone and David had free time at the studio, he would sneak Steven in there, and then later us, and we would like be in this incredible, state-of-the-art recording studio in Marin County. I think it was in Marin County, recording demos. So he had some people around him that believed in him and were supporting him. He was definitely doing his own thing, but he did have a little bit of a team behind him. Just not a lot of money, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
Still struggling and still trying to do it. And I don't think he played any live gigs. So the last thing I'll add to this chapter is that the first live Third Eye Blind show, as far as I know, was one that we played, and it was amazing because, like I met him in late 93, and at some point in early 94, they called me and they're like, hey, we have a gig opening up for the Counting Crows.
Oh, wow.
At the Fillmore. It's sold out. The Counting Crows had just put out that August and Everything After, I believe, the first one. And Mr. Jones was becoming a hit on the radio, and they were doing 3 or 4 sold-out nights at the Fillmore. And somehow, through his connections, he had gotten us opening one of those nights, and that was huge. It was the first live show I played with him. And so on that gig, it was Tony Fredinelli on guitar, who was already playing with Steven when I met him that day at the laundry place. And then Tim, curveball playing drums. And we did a show. We did the Semi-Charmed Life. We did all these songs I'm talking about. And so that was kind of a big deal. But a few months after that was when I started hearing about Kevin. Then I met Kevin. And so, I'm going to say like mid to late 94. That was in May 94. So I'm going to say, mid 94, Kevin Cadigan shows up and has a big impact on our band.
Very much so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, did he come in with that kind of that rap singing style or right away, or did that kind of develop as you guys started gelling? Yeah, as you guys started gelling.
Yeah, so, I mean that's. Yeah, I'd say that's what Steven had going for him, and that's why he was able to. That's why he had people around him that believed in him, because he was doing something cool. This is the sort of club scene that I was talking about in the Bay Area was dying out anyway. This idea of like funk metal bands or funk bands, or that. Even the club scene itself was just slowing down a little bit, just period. But Steven was coming with something really neat and original. Steven was coming with a love of Lou Reed and a love of like the beat poets, mixed with hip hop. Crazy about hip hop, crazy about rapping. So obviously the rapping, and especially the kind of like remember a Tribe Called Quest and the Daisy Age hip hop, like the sort of hippy dippy, cool hip hop, and at the same time was totally into Zeppelin and Jane's Addiction, especially Jane's Addiction, huge on Jane's Addiction, and the Police and Thin Lizzy, and so and just writing songs that had nothing to do with like whether it was going to bump at a club. Well, so that's what he brought. I mean, that's why I think that's why people were into it, and he just had met some of the right people, and he was like tall and good looking and all that shit. All that stuff matters. So yeah.
Well, and both you and Kevin both do backing vocals. Can you talk a little about your contributions with the backing vocals and how that worked between you three?
The backing vocals. Well, I mean, we didn't really start doing backing vocals until I don't know that backing vocals became a big deal until we started sort of making our demoing songs. Yeah. That's part of the thing of Third Eye Blind is that once Kevin came on and Tony Fredinelli had been playing guitar. Tony lived in Las Vegas, and they were flying him to and from with no money, and it just wasn't it was obvious. Even when I came into the band, I'm like, I'm not sure how that's going to work, because we all lived in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. Tony was a good player, but it just didn't seem to make any sense. But yeah, when Kevin came in, what he brought was like, I write my own songs, and I think that Steven and Kevin hit it off on that tip. I think that they saw something in each other, and like maybe I was pretty sure they had a writing session of some kind that was fruitful. And the next thing I knew, actually, there was this is a brutal story, but there was a photo shoot where we were going to we did one rehearsal with both Tony and Kevin. And I feel creepy telling this story. The bottom line is in the photo, one member of the band was asked, hey, just move a little to the left, a little more, until he wasn't in the photo anymore. But suffice to say, we couldn't afford to, or they couldn't afford to fly Tony down to the Bay Area all the time. And so we became a 4-piece, I guess is how I should phrase it.
Gotcha.
So Kevin comes in, and I believe he has a couple ideas already, and so we start to try to work them into a set that's mostly Steven stuff. And first things though is getting rid of the drum. Tim Wright leaves, the drummer, and ironically, enough time has passed. I think it feels like it was only a matter of months, but between the time we opened up for Counting Crows in May and let's say late '94, they had parted ways with their drummer Steve Bowman, who was coincidentally somebody that I went to my high school, was a couple years ahead of me, and was a famous Oakland East Bay musician. We got in touch with him, and he played with Third Eye Blind for a while, and with him we actually wrote a couple beginning early versions of songs. And played at least, I believe we played 2 record showcases. It felt like Third Eye Blind at that point was playing more showcases for labels than we were actually playing concerts. We had no draw.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there was connections, and there was interest in the song "Semi-Charmed Life," like from the get.
We're at this point. The band is signed to Elektra Records, correct? Can you talk? I'm wrong with that?
No. So in late '94, we're 2 years away from getting signed with Elektra, and basically, let me look at my notes. So '94, we play this gig with the Counting Crows, which as the very first gig I play with Steven, which is super cool and gives me like the confidence to go, I want to keep playing with these people. So then they continue to write. We write some stuff we're writing. At this point, we're actually like got a kind of a healthy relationship with some songs that Kevin and Steven wrote. They usually come to like a rehearsal space with just a guitar riff, like maybe a verse and chorus, like 2 guitar parts that then have to get fleshed out as a band. But so we're playing now with Steve Bowman. Actually, after a while, Steve Bowman starts to maybe not want to do the project so much, and for whatever reason, we parted ways with him. But we ended up playing with a drummer named Michael Urbano, who is like one of the best musicians to ever come out of the Bay Area. He's a super famous session drummer. He's played on so many songs you've heard. He played on all the Sheryl Crow hits. He played on Cracker's hits. He was in Cracker for quite a while. He's played on a bunch of other songs that escape me now. He played on All Star by Smash Mouth, all the Smash Mouth hits.
Mm-hmm.
Was in Smash Mouth for a while. We ended up, this is before that though, and this was maybe around the time he was in and out of studios in LA playing with Sheryl. We ended up playing with him and getting him into the band because he was a fan. We were starting to get some cool tunes, and actually I had played with him for quite a while in this bitchin' cover band, this really successful cover band in San Francisco called Curveball. Kind of you know how now there are, or in the recent past, there are bands like big bands that play funk covers,
yes.
And it's like a thing. It's like, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely.
And but at the time there was none of that. There was just like a bunch of some of the best musicians. This guy Curveball, Tim, the drummer, the original drummer for Third Eye Blind. It's super convoluted, actually. You need like a tree to figure this out. But he had a band called Curveball with a bunch of people in it. Michael Urbano, the drummer, played in Curveball with me for quite a while. And so then, hey, suddenly he had been invited to play with Steven and Kevin and I. And I knew this was like the best drummer I knew, pretty much, outside of the couple other people that I loved. So he played with us for a while, and then so in 1995 was like that was the year things started popping off, and we're still like a year away from at least from getting signed with Elektra, maybe a year and a half. 1995 is at some point we're flown to New York City to go showcase for Clive. What's his name? Clive
Davis.
Clive Davis.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We go to New York. We're flown to New York and all, fancy sort of, I mean, we're treated well. We're flown to New York to showcase for Clive. And I'll never forget one cool thing was during the rehearsals for that showcase, I remember I took a break from our rehearsal room and there was another room across the hall. Kevin and I went outside to stand, to get some air. We're listening to this band playing from behind the wall and it sounds kind of rough. It's like some kind of really dissonant jazz, like jam band with jazz chords, and just sounds a little like we're like, who are these people? And then the door opens and Jeff Buckley walks out.
Oh wow!
And it's like, holy shit, it's Jeff Buckley, and Jeff Buckley was incredibly sweet. It was like, oh my God, I've been listening to you guys. You guys sound great. Who are you? And that was super heavy, that was, and that wasn't that long before he passed away, unfortunately. But, after we met him and he went back in the room, I listened differently to what was happening inside that room. And I could hear that they were just working hard on something special, But anyway, so yeah, we did our showcase for Arista in New York, and it didn't, just as all the other ones didn't happen for us. I think that we weren't ready as a live band. I don't think we had the songs fine-tuned enough. I don't think we had enough good songs. But we kept getting these chances. We also got some money from Arista. So we went back to the Bay Area and recorded some demos. And at that point in 95, we also meet Eric Valentine, which is huge. That's a massive change for Third Eye Blind. I don't know if you know who that is. You know who Eric Valentine is?
Co-producer, correct?
Right. He's an incredible record producer, and he became like a fifth member of the band for sure. Like a George Martin type of guy he can play every instrument himself, and he's got incredible ideas about not just engineering and sonics, but song arrangement and tones. And what instrument and like an amazing collection of vintage gear to use. It's just great taste.
Yeah.
He helped us hone the songs we had, and as we were writing newer songs, he helped us hone those and recorded us. It just made a difference to have him in the room. We were still working, I believe, even in 95 with David Gleason and Ren Kleiss. And so Eric was massive for us, and then there was a famous story in 1995 where I believe Stephen and Kevin, after all this, in the middle of the year, went to New York and had a meeting with David Massey at Columbia, because I neglected to mention that since maybe the year before or earlier that year, Randy Jackson, who was an A&R guy at Columbia, Sony Columbia, was crazy about Third Eye Blind, and he knew that Semi-Charmed Life was going to be a hit. So he was always trying to get Columbia Records to sign the band. So those guys went out and through some kind of like, I think they had a conversation that went, so this is documented stuff, but they had a conversation, Stephen and David Massey, who is like the CEO or some high up label executive, was like, okay, maybe I'd like to sign you guys. When can I see you next? And Steven said, well, you could, Oasis is going to play in San Francisco next week. You could put us on that bill and come out and see that. And apparently he picked up the phone and did it, because when they went back and made it happen, because when they came back to the Bay Area, they were like, hey, we're going to open up for Oasis next week at the Civic Center, which is this massive. And that was the What's the Story Morning Glory tour.
Yeah.
So they would just put out Champagne Supernova, and they had already had Wonderwall. They're huge.
Yeah.
And we're like, we can't draw, 30 people. But we got this gig, and we practiced for it And actually, we slayed it. Like we did well. Somehow we had it together. And actually, we were asked to come out and do an encore, which is completely unheard of, and yada yada. There's other stories around that people can find online. But so that's why 1995 was a super intense year for the band, and we just continued to record our demos, hone the demos. We had some money that had been given to us from a couple different labels. And then in 1996, we got to a point where we had basically a 12, 13 song demo that is pretty much the record that that debut record. And we would shop that, and we had, what they call a bidding war. And then we played a showcase with all these heavy duty, label big shots in the audience in LA. And after that night, we went with Elektra.
Well, are we at the point yet where you guys are picking out studios to record the new album?
Well, that was kind of that's the other, for me, that's like one of the special things about the band, and one of the things that we were very fortunate about, because we had been doing all this recording here and there, really over the course of like a year and a half, on and off, or maybe just a year, let's say, we had most everything tracked. We had drum tracks from Skywalker Ranch.
Yeah.
Even though we didn't have a record deal yet, we had some stuff that we had tracked there. I believe we went back there with the record company money, with the proper Elektra label deal money, and finished. So I guess what I'm saying is we had all this time to hone the music. This is a famous thing for bands who have a sophomore slump. They've got lots of time to make that first record, and then the second record, if it, God forbid it does well, or when it does well, you've got to hurry up and get in and make the second one, and it becomes like really a lot of pressure. But we had a lot of time, and that's why, we were very lucky that way, and we had Eric and other people, and even the manager. The manager was a guy who had really good ideas about stuff, just in terms of like direction and sort of vibe. And so what was, sorry, your question? Yes. Then we were at the point where we could say, okay, here are the studios we want to choose to go and finish this thing, to go and do the necessary overdubs. Maybe we'll change a bit here or there, and we'll make it better by going to this massive, orchestra recording space in Skywalker Ranch. This thing the size of a basketball arena. Which we did. We took advantage of it, but we were able to save money in that way too, because we had a lot of it done already. And so, we did. We went to a few studios. We went to Skywalker Ranch, which is, at George Lucas's place, and it was nice because, like I said, we'd been there on the quiet before, and then now we were able to go in there with our heads held high and meet George and go eat in the commissary and stuff. And then and they also have Skywalker Ranch, at least they have quarters where you can stay, because it's kind of out in the boonies. And we went to a place called The Site, which is a similar studio up actually right across the way from Skywalker Ranch, where you live there and you sort of, free from the distraction of whatever else. We did most of the stuff at Eric Valentine's studio in Palo Alto, which was called Hunk of Shit.
Yeah.
So for all the fancy places we went, we did an awful lot of stuff at a place called Hunk of Shit. So.
I know that the songwriting was more on Steven's end of things and Kevin's, but thematically the songwriter dealt with some pretty heavy,
heavy material,
heavy subject matter, drug use, failed relationships, suicide prevention. For you, the musician, did some of that stuff seem pretty heavy to you at the time with the subject matter?
Well, so first of all, I would definitely say, and I don't know if we'll get into this as we go song by song, but very few of the songs on that record were not group, let's say, much more of a group writing process than it seems. There are two guys credited on those songs, but actually, I've got my credits in other places, like I don't know how I'd put it, but let's just say that there are a bunch of songs on the record, most of the songs on the record actually, especially let's say the Cadigan songs, where Kevin brought in a guitar riff or two, and then as a band we fleshed it out and arranged it, and a lot of times those were my ideas, and oftentimes adding chord changes and rhythmic changes, and sometimes the drummer had an idea for a rhythmic arrangement. So, actually that first Third Eye Blind record was much more democratic than you might think, and then it's been sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Portrayed.
Yeah.
So I mean that's the beauty of it. That's kind of why it's so good. Another reason why it's so good is that you've got everybody giving their all, and you've got and not only have you got Brad is one of the drummers who played on the record. Urbano played on 4 songs, Michael Urbano, and they're 2 completely different drummers. So we have the benefit of having Brad Hargraves is an amazing musician, but he was a jazz drummer when we met him. And so his drumming is like a sort of more lyrical, at the time anyway, and kind of notey and thoughtful. And Urbano was a sort of rock and roll. I mean, he can do anything, but he was like a Bonham, heavy hitter type thing. And that's how he approached the Third Eye Blind music. And we got the benefit of having him and Brad and me, and I'm into Geddy Lee and stuff that these Kevin and Steven would never deign to listen to. And I'm crazy about the Beatles. These guys weren't totally, so it's just a neat combination of that's, to me, that's what makes that record what it is. And Eric Valentine is this sort of village, it took a village to make that, not just the time, but the actual artistic intent behind it came from having these people with different, backgrounds.
Very good.
But yeah.
Very good.
In answer to your question, of course, yeah, the first song on the first demo that I got when I met Steven had a song called Slow Motion, which is since become a cult, Third Eye Blind deep cut favorite. And that's just piano and Steven singing. And I think there's guitar on it. We're not playing on it. And that's, Miss Jones taught me English, but I think I just shot her son because he owed me money, and with a bullet in the chest, you can't run. I mean, it's very dark, super dark, sort of troubled people, story of troubled people. And yeah, nobody I knew was writing stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Jeff, do you have the next one?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess, I don't know, we really didn't get into the album, what do you call that? The album title. I always wonder, I bought a lot of albums over my years, and a lot of debut albums by bands are self-titled. Does that come from more of a record label push, or do bands, want to have a self-titled first album, or is that, how's that work? How'd that work for you guys?
Well, you know what? One thing I'll say is that, and I mean, I must have been spoiled rotten, because I don't remember 1 second where we had any pressure. Actually, there was one moment, which I wouldn't call pressure, but we never had any interference from our record label. We never had anybody show up and sort of stand over our shoulders and check what we were doing, or make suggestions, or push us into naming the record this or that, or using this or that photo. But yeah, naming the record Third Eye Blind, it's possible, because I can't really remember. It could be that that's what Steven wanted. But it's also equally possible that no one could think of anything else, and it just seemed like the right thing to do. Because that's what happened on our second record, for sure. No one had any ideas, and it was what do we do? Good Lord help us. We have a deadline. And it was here's this photo of a sun that's from NASA, and it's colored blue. Okay, let's name the record Blue. That's how that went.
As far as the album artwork design, is there a story behind that?
Yeah. So, You know what's really cool that I had forgotten about was the woman who took the photos. First of all, the woman who took the photos for the record, I'm not sure if she took the cover, but she took the photos of us on the inside. And most of them anyway, is this woman, Kate Garner, who's like a really famous photographer, music photographer, fashion photographer from England, who has like just recently, Sinead O'Connor passed. Mm-hmm. And she's got, I think all the most famous photos of Sinead, including her first record that she did, the photo on the cover of her first record was taken by this woman, Kate Garner. And I had no idea how much of a heavyweight she was when she was, during our session. But she is a British woman who lived in San Francisco. And not only that, do you guys happen to remember a band called Hazy Fantasy?
No.
Okay, so it's like a kind of a one-hit wonder, like really neat band from the mid-'80s, a British band. Very sort of Boy George, like chic, like dreadlocks and like pirates kind of uniform. And they had a hit song called Shiny, Shiny, right down behind me, shiny, shiny, sha-na-na-na. I don't know if you know that song, but
it's not ringing a bell.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, I'm a weirdo. I knew that song from like watching the video on whatever show when I was a kid, and I loved it. Kate Garner took the photos for the record, and she's a heavy photographer. The cover, which is the picture of the woman with the hand covering her forehead, that was Steven's idea. That was fully like his concept that he had executed, and that's his hand. And I'm not sure who the woman is. I believe it's a friend of ours or theirs. And then the last thing I'll say is the back cover is really neat, and I'm really proud of it because what it is we had a bunch of photos taken by Kate. One of them was like we were in a really dark room, and you could sort of barely see us. When I looked at it on the photo sheet, on the spreadsheet, or whatever it's called, contact sheet, I said, you know what? That looks like I told our manager, that looks like the back cover of Revolver, the Beatles Revolver. And he knew exactly what I was talking about because he's a vinyl freak and a record freak. And we talked about it for a minute. He went to Elektra and they said, oh, that's a great idea. And what they did was take that photo and mock up everything else around it so that it looked exactly like the back cover of the Beatles Revolver, like down to the fonts, down to where they placed the Elektra logo and the Third Eye Blind logo or the same place that the EMI and logo. And I mean, if you hold up the two albums next to each other, you can see that they tried to duplicate it. And so not only that, the font because they used that Revolver font, which is what we called it after that became the Third Eye Blind logo font that is sort of most commonly associated with the band.
Yeah.
Oh, and that was me. That was me and the manager who was cool enough to like feel me on that, and everybody went with it.
That's fantastic.
That's awesome. This concludes part 1. Stick around. We'll have part 2.
Fantastic. Good night.
Everybody pulls the plug and says their last goodbyes. Move to the sunshine, fight the grip of nights. If they ever take from you, then you plug out both their eyes. They roll the dice. Take your chances.
Welcome to the night. You think you know Night Demon? Then the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast is for you. Step into the darkness as we peel back the curtain to give you an unprecedented, all-access look into the mind and the heart of the demon. We're talking band history, song analysis, studio anecdotes, stories from the road. It's everything a diehard Night Demon fan could want and more. This is the only place to learn the inside scoop, the deep dive trivia, the untold tales from the band members themselves and those closest to the Night Demon story. Need more? The Sacred Night Demon Crypt will be pried open to reveal demo recordings that have never before seen the light of day, all with in-depth commentary by the band and the people who were there for the writing and recording process. This is a gold mine, a treasure trove of all things Night Demon. Head over to nightdemon.net or wherever you listen to podcasts.